I suppose this is the sort of thing that happens around Halloween, isn't it? I don't have kids myself, so there's not much reason for me to get excited about it. And the whole neighborhood more than makes up for my lack of decorations. Jack-o'-lanterns on just about every porch and doorstep, fake tombstones with bad puns carved into the plastic, that white gunk that's supposed to look like spider's web but looks more like cotton candy. And it all began popping up not halfway through September. I think it was the McDougalls, though I can't be certain. They live on the corner of Hillside Road and Dorothy Drive, not quite a mile down the road from me. Theirs was the first, but it was also modest and sensible. A few black bat stickers stuck onto the front door. I half considered just leaving a bowl of candy out on the doorstep with a scribbled note reading, "Take one, please." Goodness, just picking a candy is hard enough. You go down the seasonal items aisle of Stop and Shop, and it looks like some brilliant tropical bird just vomited all over the shelves. God, half these colors surely don't appear in nature. I always ask myself, is this what kids like nowadays? And maybe it is. But in the end, I always go for some chocolate, little Hershey's bars or Reese's if I'm in the mood for a change. I'm sure the kids will get plenty of sweet tart sour chews. For God's sake, which is it, sweet tart or sour? From people like that young blonde across the street. Chocolate is brown, and brown is real, and real is healthier for kids than just about anything else they can get. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know I'm coming off a little grumpy here. I'm not like the Philbrooks on Nutmeg Street who hate Halloween because of its supposed satanic roots. Those are the kind of people that even me, curmudgeony old Mrs. Kingston, can safely tell to get a life. And I'm also not like the Faulkners who just sort of pretend not to be home when the trick-or-treating begins. If you ask me, folk just aren't as neighborly as they used to be. I don't know why, and I don't really care either. I just personally still believe in the value of community. I guess that's why I ultimately decided to actually answer the door and hand out sweets. I didn't really want to do it, but damn it, I'll show these antisocial good-for-nothings what it means to live in a neighborhood. Sometimes you do things with others, not because you want to, but because it brings you closer together and makes you stronger as a group. During the 12-hour period from 7 p.m. on October 31st to 7 a.m. on November 1st, I saw Dough Henderson twice. The first time was when he came to my front step dressed as a dinosaur. Or was it a dragon? Crocodile? Anyway, I remember it was one of the first costumes that I was actually able to recognize that night. By the way, if any parents are reading this, I looked up who Deadpool is, and I do not think he's the sort of person you want your 5-year-old dressing up as. He was standing with 2 friends, as well as his sister and one of her friends. If I can guess correctly, the other 4 were dressed as a black cat, some kind of masked clown woman, a robot, and well, I'm not actually sure what it was. It looked like the boy had glued together colorful cardboard boxes together to form the crude figure of a person. Regardless of what they were dressed as, I gave them each a Hershey's miniature milk chocolate bar. I can't remember if I smiled, but I did try to be friendly in my voice at least. They all said thank you in unison, and I waved them off to the next house. The second time I saw little Dough Henderson was in the paper the next morning. Sometime after visiting my house, the poor boy had apparently gone missing. I instantly felt a small pain inside. Doug was only about 5, and he and his family moved into a house one over from the one across the street, where that blonde lives. I did my neighborly duty and welcomed them to the neighborhood with a cherry pie, which they accepted graciously. I could tell right away that the Hendersons were good people, and their kids, while expectedly rambunctious, looked as if they were well on the path to growing up to be contributing members to society. It's a lot easier to be a good neighbor when you don't hate the people that live around you. I didn't talk much to Doug personally, of course. What do I have to talk about with a 5-year-old? But he always said hello and goodbye, please and thank you. And I'll admit, I thought it was downright precious when I called him a little gentleman and he asked me what that meant. According to the Current, he had last been seen away from his little group of friends, around with a man who didn't appear to be wearing a costume. Or if he was, nobody knew what it was supposed to be. He He was dressed all in black, making him look like a priest to at least one witness. It wasn't anybody from our neighborhood, but that's not too surprising in and of itself. After all, people from other parts of town will often take their kids trick-or-treating around here, since the houses are so neatly packed together and there's little traffic. But he was alone, and nobody from any part of town had come forward to recognize him. Little Doug Henderson was the first person to go missing in all my time living on Garden Street, which has got to be nearly 30 years at this point. It seems like all the Halloween decorations came down a little bit quicker this year, in some places replaced by missing person signs. I know there's one posted on a telephone pole on the corner of Garden Street and Hilliard Street that I pass by whenever I leave the house. And for the last 6 days, those signs are all anyone has seen of the boy. That is, until this past night. I had been turning in my sleep all throughout the night until it reached a point where my hand was sticking out from under the covers. It was so chilly that it woke me up, and I instantly drew my hand back under. Once I felt the warmth flowing back into it, I glanced briefly at the clock sitting at my bedside, which read 2:36. Normally I sleep straight through the night, but on those rare occasions when I am woken, it's so damn tricky for me to get back to sleep. So I decided to put on my bathrobe and slippers and shamble down to the kitchen for a nice glass of warm milk. I passed by the front door and by the window looking out into the front yard and across the street. Had I not been wearing my glasses, I don't think I'd have caught it. But as I moved to the kitchen, I caught sight of something across the street and one house over, where the Hendersons live. It looked like a little figure of a person standing by the front door. I was still fairly groggy, so I grabbed the binoculars I keep on the fireplace to watch the birds around the bird feeder in my backyard to get a better look. When I adjusted the binoculars, I saw little Doug Henderson standing on the front steps to his house, perfectly still and only just visible in the orange rays of a street lamp. He must have only just found his way home, as he was still dressed in that costume of his, twigs and dead leaves clinging to that limp, false tail. Of course, so many thoughts went through my head at that point, most of them joyous and relieved. But among the frantic throngs of thoughts, all eager to get through the door into the front of my mind, there was one, just one, that made it. I've never seen a child stand that still before. Children fidget and squirm and shift their weight from foot to foot. But Doug Henderson just stood there, still as stone. And as each second ticked by, the odder it looked. After a few minutes passed by, he rang the doorbell. Or rather, he rung it again, as I assume he must have done so at least once before. My next thought after that was, you don't need to ring the doorbell, silly boy, it's your own home. Do the Hendersons keep their door locked at night? I don't. It's not as if the neighborhood had gone downhill or anything. At least, not in that way. Must be an old habit from, wherever they used to live. Might be city folk originally, I don't remember. In any event, the door had to have been locked. Otherwise, the boy would have surely just gone inside, run up to his parents' room, and given them the most wonderful, rude awakening anyone's ever had. It took about 15 minutes or so, I guess, which is actually pretty quick considering. Maybe they saw him from the window, standing as still and silent as one of those fake tombstones. It was his mother, who covered her mouth with her hands the instant she saw him. She stepped out and scooped up little Doug in her arms, spinning in place and weeping silently over the doormat. When she was done, she set him back down on his feet, going into the house. When she sat him back down, at first I thought he was just going to keep standing, and for several seconds he did. But then, either on his own, or else prompted by a call from his mother, he stepped over the threshold and disappeared from view. Even with my glass of warm milk, I can't seem to get back to sleep. Maybe this is just me, but there was something uncanny about what I just saw. That's partially why I wrote all this down. I was hoping it would make more sense once written. but it seems my hopes were misplaced. If anything, it makes even less sense. I don't know. For all I know, which, again, is nothing, maybe the poor boy suffered something awful, something that traumatized him. Oh dear, it sounds terrible just thinking about it. But when he came to my house dressed as whatever large, toothy reptile he was a normal boy. But that wasn't a normal boy standing on that doorstep, lit orange by that street lamp. I know, that's a horrible thing to say, especially in this day and age, but... Well, between you, me, and 3:15 a.m., that's what I saw, and this is how I feel about it. Now, the other reason I decided to type all this down is because I was hoping it would tire me out enough to get back to sleep, and that at least has been successful. I'll probably sleep late tomorrow morning and then go visit the Hendersons to see how they're all doing. Much better, I imagine, now that little Doug's home. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. Good night. Oh, and happy Halloween.